Georgia has some great offensive linemen. They always seem to have somebody cooking. And this year, you got Tate Radledge, you got Jared Wilson. But you know who might be the best of them out of all of them? Dylan Fairchild, number 53. Huge fan of this guy. And I think he's going to hear his name called pretty early come the NFL draft this April. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to do a scouting report, get through to some of this film and some of the areas he needs to work on and some of the areas he's already really, really good at. So let's get right into it here. Talk about number 53, Dylan Fairchild. First things you're going to notice with him, I love the hand punch, the striking ability. He's not afraid to come at defensive linemen. And you see the little snatch trap right there, using that hand usage to full effect. I think he does a great job at repositioning and refitting his hands. As we go through some reps, you're going to see him consistently going through, and even though defensive linemen can get inside his chest, which is a bit of a weakness, maybe he's not the longest guy, but you see him. Look at the little swipe of the left hand there of that Alabama defender. He does that all over his film and is really good using those hands and just continue to try to rework his hands inside. And even when he loses reps, he still does the dirty work. And it's not always pretty with him, but man, he just finds ways to win. Here he gets a little high with his leverage, and we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get into some of the negatives too, but he does get a little bit high, which results in him losing some power. But you see him just fighting through reps. And he is a state champion wrestler. And I love those state champion wrestlers, going back to Zach Frazier last season. They're just the state champion wrestlers, man. They know how to win on the offensive lineman. And Dylan Fairchild is a skilled technician with his hands and just being able to grapple on guys and, make it, do all that dirty work that we're talking about. Here he is in a little stunt pickup working with his left tackle. He's got some pretty good awareness. Now, there are some times where he'll let some stunts go by or maybe just didn't have the quickness to get there, but he does a good job looking for work and continuing to have that feel around him. Let's get into some run blocking stuff. You see him climb into the second level. He certainly has a good first step. And the Mauler mentality, it's there, baby. I'm telling you, this guy's got that oomph. He's got that fire that you want from your offensive lineman. And I think he does a really good job with his angles in the run game. He's not the most powerful run blocker, but he does have an understanding of leverage and being able to kind of give it that last oomph right there. You see him just kind of pile driving and helping his running back get into the end zone. And now working against Walter Nolan, you just kind of see him ferociously moving Walter Nolan back. He actually had a very nice game against Walter Nolan too. And we're going to get into some of this other stuff too, where I just feel like that he does what you need him to do in the run game. He's not going to be fantastic, but that grit and that determination and that ability to just kind of maul dudes and wall dudes off, just effective enough, gets the job done with him. Now let's get into some of the negatives here, and you're going to see it right off the bat. He doesn't have maybe the power profile you always look for to reset and re-anchor at times, and his hand placement doesn't always land. And you see him sometimes where he does try to rework his hands. It's like, well, you got to be able to hit more consistently with your punch. His punch can be a little wide too on defenders, which results in some problems. That could have been a penalty called right there. Once again, wide hands working on that defender, and that can result. Here's another one that could result in a penalty there. That probably should have been called. Here's a little stunt pickup too. He does a good job, but here's the thing. Sometimes it shows with that leverage. See, a low man wins. And that's one thing with offensive linemen. You got to teach, and you see him throughout this process. A lot of times he's the high man, and he needs to work on that. Allowing access to your chest one too often versus stronger, longer defenders, that's going to be a problem. This was actually his one credited sack all season long versus Texas right there. So I had to point that out. So going back to this, just taking a look at his one credited sack from PFF this year. Again, determine, was that his fault? Was he late to come off of that? Yes. So I can understand crediting that is what it is, but it's not the worst thing he's given up. And I'd rather see that sort of thing than the one-on-one stuff. Now, getting into some of the run blocking stuff he struggles with, you see, he doesn't have maybe the most flexibility in space. And also, I don't think he is the most powerful guy, right? He doesn't per se maul dudes at the line. He can kind of get pushed back a little bit at times. His balance in the run game too is a little susceptible. You see him, a lot of these plays, he's going to end up on the ground. And here's another one which just doesn't quite have the power. Maybe some stronger defensive lineman can overpower him a little bit. Once again, getting on the ground here to finish things up. So those are just some things we have to look at and get better at. So let's recap everything up. A little summarization. Dylan Fairchild, the state champion, Bruse Feldman's freaks list. He is credited with like a huge monster bench press and squat. So all those things, he checks the boxes there. And he is really strong. Like, he is a strong player. I think the stem of the problem with some of those issues comes down to he's got to get more consistent leverage and be the low man. And that's a technical thing that he can continue to get better on. He's a young player. He's not an older prospect or anything like that. But some of the strengths here, good size. He is a good athlete too. I mean, he's not maybe the most twitchy guy. He's not the greatest lateral mover, but he can get out in space. And you saw him at the second level when he connected, man, oh, it was a thing of beauty. So he has that first step explosion and the first step quickness with his feet and pass protection as well. And then he attacks defensive linemen. And what I mean by that is he loves to get hands on defensive linemen first. He's not passive. He's aggressive, but he's not like overly aggressive. Like he's going to be constantly, on his toes in pass pro or anything like that. But he takes the aggression to defensive linemen. He takes the attack to them. And I prefer offensive linemen to do that. I just think that's really important, especially when you get to the next level. You got to get hands on those defensive linemen, especially longer, stronger guys. If you're not getting hands on you, it's going to be a problem. So even if you're not the longest guy, which I think Fairchild's got plenty enough length, he's not a long offensive lineman, but I wouldn't call him like stubby arm T-Rex guy or anything like that. He's got long enough arms to get the job done. And I like his punching power too. And then in terms of his hand usage, I think he's got pretty solid hand usage to be able to reset his hands. He's constantly doing that and trying to get back to the inside. It's not always perfect with him, but he is very patient in pass protection, which is also an important recipe with his awareness and ability to just kind of recognize things going on around him and work with his teammates as well. And I think he plays with a really good base. Like, he's really wide with his base. You can see him. He's not really getting skinny. It just comes down to, I want to see more consistent knee bend, more consistent leverage to get down lower and to use that power profile. Last thing here, in terms of run blocking, he's a very effective run blocker with his angles. He gets to the second level, and when he does connect, like I talked about earlier, it's very, very nice. And I also think that he understands his angles. So he's not an elite run blocker by any standpoint. He's not going to move guys crazy amounts off the line of scrimmage, displacement, and all those sort of things. He's not Tyler Booker level strength, but he certainly is an effective run blocker. And then weaknesses wise, we saw some of that slow footwork for some speed. And yes, he isn't the most laterally equipped. He doesn't have crazy agility. He certainly is not an elite athlete, but he gets the job done. And it's not like something that was a glaring hole. And also, we talked about this earlier, but the power profile, as I was saying, playing a little bit high. I know I mentioned that a couple of times there, so I'm going to keep that pretty short. Hand placement, continue to work on more of, I want to see him not just get inside a little bit more consistent, but quicker too, right? And that way you don't always have to reset your hands. And you're not always constantly trying, because these longer guys get inside his chest a little bit too often. And that's what exposes him a little bit too much to, him losing leverage. And that goes back to the power profile thing. And then with the wide hands, you saw him a couple of times there. Get to the point where you could get some penalties called on you. And last thing, the balance in the run game. He was on the ground one too many times. And certainly something I had to note and jot down as a weakness for him, and just continuing to improve his balance and his patience at the second level. So my grade for him is day 2. Round 3, I think, is a really good value for him, and somebody that I think is going to be a very good starter at the next level. I don't know if he's going to be an elite guy. He's somebody that I think can make a Pro Bowl like 1 or 2 times in his career, but I suspect him to be a very solid offensive lineman. And it's hard to find good offensive linemen in the NFL. So I feel like somebody's going to get a steal on this dude, because right now it seems like he's getting more like day 3 type of movement at the moment. But I think he's more of a late day 2, or even, somebody I'd be okay with at the back end of the second round, depending on how he tests and how he looks at the combine. If he's doing any of the Senior Bowl stuff or anything like that, I'm not 100% sure, but he is certainly a guy that I feel good about in round number 3 to take him and be a plug-and-play guy, somebody that you stick right into the left guard or right guard. He has experience on both scenarios, and he maybe even could play center for a team too. I think that's very possible. He probably have to just practice and take some reps at the center position, but I certainly don't see why he can't play center either at the next level. So certainly somebody that gives you that 3-way versatility on the interior of your offensive line in a more of a inside zone scheme. I don't think he's an outside zone guy. I really don't. I think he's more going to be an inside zone power gap scheme guy. And that's okay. No problem with that. I mean, I think, there's still half the teams in the NFL that run those type of systems. So certainly a dude that I feel really good about as a solid starter in the NFL. Maybe like an Alex Kappa type of player. Maybe, I don't know if that's a 1-to-1 comp, but I think there's some similarities there and some of his strengths and his weaknesses. So let me know what you think. Dylan Fairchild, do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you like him? Where would you take him? Do you want him? But I'd take him. I sure would. Anyway, I hope you guys have a good day. And my name's G Sling. I'm doing my thing. I'll talk to you later.